If your meetings are full of awkward silences, passive nodding, it's not the audience's fault. At least it's not fully the audience's fault. You're probably asking the wrong type of questions. Great leaders don't just ask questions, they use the right kind at the right moment.
Welcome to It Doesn't Take a Genius.
Ramsey!
Marshall.
Man, good intro. I liked it. Yes. Well, welcome the listeners to episode 3, I believe, of the Inquiring Leader show, based upon our new book.
That is correct. We had a little snafu at the beginning where we pressed the record button and I just waited in silence for you to scream out my name as you normally do. And I forgot that I had a cold open. I had a hook.
So, yeah. Well, you're so used to, everywhere you go now, people just screaming out your last name.
I do have some people doing that, which is weird. Yeah.
Yeah, which you just expect it now.
Speaking of weird, can I tell you a story
Please.
That you've heard before?
Please
from
do.
the book?
Yeah. Yes, from the book. Yes.
Just a little, just a little sort of setup for the readers to understand a little bit of what we're talking about here. I'm going to gloss over some details here to keep the client anonymous, and it will become very apparent why that is momentarily. I had a department manager call me, very seasoned professional, very good at her job, extremely well respected. And she said, "I've got a big problem." I mean, what's up? And she lays out this scenario, and I had known some things about her department, but I didn't realize how bad it had gotten. Basically, there was an employee with a medical issue. This medical issue was causing episodes of symptoms to happen at work, and her very supportive colleagues were rallying around this employee with medical issues. In a couple cases, at least 2 times, I know that an ambulance had to be called, and they had to roll her to the hospital. So it was serious. It was really serious, and it was absolutely shutting down the office. And like when I say shutting down, I mean nobody was able to get any work done. Everything was grinding to a halt, and this department, a lot of other departments depended on it. It was a bad situation. And so she calls me with this real quandary. She said, I'm in this place now where I have to decide, for the good of the office staying gainfully employed and doing what we're supposed to be doing for the office, I really should lay this lady off. But I don't want to do that. She has no income. I'm leaving her high and dry. And so what do? I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. And so, she sort of left me with that and, put the ball in my court. And I sucked up my courage and said, what else could you do? And there's a very long, awkward pause and kind of a half laugh and a little bit of anger behind it, saying, "I don't know, Mark. That's why I called you." There's more to that story, but it really sets up what we're here to talk about today. So I'll give the rest of the story here in a minute, but that's a type of question that I use there. And the types of questions that you choose to use are a really big deal, aren't they?
Oh, most certainly. And to just dissect that a little bit, that you resisted, right? Hats off to you for resisting the urge to give advice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right. Which is exactly what she was calling you to do.
That's what she wanted.
Yeah. I want this. I pay you.
Yep.
You're my coach.
Yep.
And I'm calling you. And I specifically said, I need to know what to do.
Yep.
and it's so difficult, right? But you have to resist the urge to provide a solution.
That's right. That's right. And in fact, we're going to have a podcast episode very soon about another part of our book where we talk about how limited it is when you are that kind of directive leader and always,
Mhm.
giving advice, giving direction, giving, being the source of all the knowledge and wisdom. Let's go ahead and peel back the curtain on that just a little bit. Even for an outside coach who's the independent third party hired to help out, even I don't want to be the source of all wisdom and knowledge. And the reason is I might be wrong. And
That's
and now the failure's on me, right? Because I suggested something that quote unquote didn't work. There's a number of other reasons why, and we're going to get into that. But yeah, you want to stay. You want to. You'd really like to be an inquiring leader, which is our new book that we are obviously hawking here and giving some of the nuggets from in this episode. Um, to do that, it's important to know the different types of questions that you could ask.
yeah, definitely. And the idea that you have a little bit of information,
Yep.
a whole bunch of assumptions, and now you're going to offer a solution.
Right.
Well, that's not gonna go well at all.
Right.
The odds of you guessing right in your solution pretty low.
Yeah.
So
100% right. 100% right.
the
So,
so before we go on to the questions, the other thing you talked about, like in the cold open, which was very dramatic. If your meetings are full of awkward silences or passive nodding, uh, you you know, I was told you can't blame the audience. You can't blame the
yeah.
participants of the meeting. You can't blame your people. And I learned that from watching comedians talk about comedians. Yeah.
Mm,
So great comedians. If another comedian bombs, they come off stage and they go, "These guys don't get it." Yeah,
yeah.
my stuff's too smart for them.
Yep.
They blame the audience. Uh, Unlike when I was dating, right? It was it's not them, it's you.
Right.
Right? So the idea, like, if you ask a question and there's no engagement, right? There's nothing working. That's on you to
Right.
figure out. Okay, what is this? What does this team need? What do we need to spark engagement, generate a conversation? It may simply be a rephrasing of the question, rewording of the question. Maybe we stop on this topic and get to, all right, what's causing the lack of engagement,
Yep.
things like that. But we don't blame and I see so many people do this, right? What's wrong with you guys? Man, you guys are dead.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, don't do that. Don't blame them. Figure out what do they need in order to move forward.
Be a little more humble. And
Yeah.
I think one of the other things you can do is stay with the question, and we'll talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
That's something also from the book that we talk about. Letting the silence just hang there. Sometimes you just need some silence to give people space to think.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. I've read some places like 7 to 10 seconds for people to
oh,
process your question.
oh, you mean an eternity? Because that's what it
Yes.
feels like.
Yeah. Yeah, because the person who asked the question obviously has some ideas of what the audience might say,
Yeah, yeah,
and I'm really excited for you to say them, and you're not doing it fast enough
yep,
because
yep,
I got them in my head.
yep,
so yeah, that ask the question, be quiet. So let's talk about for your scenario. There's four types of questions that could be asked uh,
yeah,
in this scenario where somebody calls you. They gave you, the broadest of overviews of the situation, and then are jumping to, and what do you think I should do portion of the program. But there's some things that need to happen before we get to that part.
that's correct. That's correct. And in fact, they did happen in the course of the phone call. And I jumped ahead to the big, crux moment. But the first is, as we talk about in the book, clarifying questions.
Mm-hmm.
So these are, they are what they do exactly what they say. They are to help you clarify what's going on. And sometimes it's clarification for both of you. This is to reduce confusion, to make sure that we have a common understanding of what the heck it is that we're talking about. You sometimes you just need to start with clarifying what exactly it is that we're talking about. What's the actual thing that's happening? What's the issue we're discussing?
Oh yeah, yeah. So many times, and we had an example. We were in a training yesterday where people gave examples of one person asked a question, and another person answered something that had nothing to do with the question
Yes.
because they made an assumption. I get what you're asking me, and I answer it, and then the third party looks at it and goes, "Well, they're not even talking to each other."
Right.
Right? They're talking past each other because there's no clarification on, all right, what is the topic that we're fixing to dive deeper into?
Yeah, shout out to Linda from our training yesterday who basically stopped a conversation. She said, "Both of you, stop it. I want you to be quiet and you talk and say what you said. Now you talk and you be quiet and say what you said." And as soon as that happened, it was like, oh, we're talking about XYZ. I didn't realize I was causing that issue. There was some clarification that happened as a result of doing that. So,
Oh yeah.
um,
So some
talking about this,
examples of those
yeah,
questions, right? All right. So what's the outcome you're looking for?
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
One of my favorites. All right. So what's the problem we're trying to solve? In your case of your story, right, the problem we're trying to solve is disruption to the office, continuing to perform at a level without disruption, and this person, wanting to keep this person employed.
yeah. And this is such a powerful question because sometimes you've got a solution mapped out in your brain and you're expecting them to say, "Oh, I need blah 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 to be solved." And then when they actually start talking about the problem that the outcome that they're aiming for, it turns out it's something totally different that's really the headache for them or what they see as the barrier. Oh, okay, that's what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Another example, this can you can sort of chunk it up or chunk it down, as our mentor Greg Tansky used to say. But what are the steps of the process we're talking about here, right? In other words, what are the parts of this thing? Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's zooming way out and saying, what kind of a thing is this that we're talking about? So an example of that might be, oh yeah, this is just yet another example in our business how we have not thought through our policy on X. So we're talking about this little micro issue, but like, what kind of a thing is this micro issue? Well, Johnny being late yesterday and that big, blow up that happened with the customers as a result, that's because we haven't been clear about that policy. So what we're actually talking about is not Johnny, we're talking about the big policy. Well, the opposite's true. You can also say, well, what are the steps of that policy? What are the parts of that policy? Well, it's actually this one little part here that's the issue. That's what we're talking about today. So that, again, what are you doing? You're just getting clarity. We haven't solved anything. We haven't even figured out what the problem is. We've just clarified what's going on.
Oh yeah, yeah. And so now, right, we've kind of dove into, all right, we've clarified the problem, and now we can start to ask probing questions.
Yes.
All right, so within this problem, okay, and that's exactly, you naturally headed to that spot. All right, so all right, so that's the problem. All right, so tell me more about that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So here's, yeah, then all of a sudden you started to get some of the detail, but it's not detail all over the place. It's detail about the problem that you clarified that we truly want to solve.
Yeah, we've zeroed in on that, and now let's start to probe and go a little deeper. So these are root cause questions typically.
Mm-hmm.
These are analysis questions. What do you think's the real challenge here for you? What do you think the real issue is here?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that keeps happening? Now if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you know that we don't ask why questions up front. This would be something that happens deeper into the process.
Mm-hmm.
What a better way maybe to ask that is just to say, what are the factors that are leading to that particular thing happening?
Mhm.
You're asking them to dissect it a little bit.
Well, and yeah, and one of our favorites, as you get answers, you can ask, okay, and what else?
Yes. Yes.
And then all of a sudden, yeah, because I need, because I don't have the answers, if
Right.
I may have answers that aren't good. I need to know, all right, and what else is going on here?
Yeah.
What else are you seeing? I need more information. And that question, you can ask that question multiple times in a row.
In fact, you could ask it after any of these types of questions,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're just going back to the well and getting them to go a little deeper. But that's one of the things with probing questions is you're looking for when you feel like you're just getting surface answers, and a lot of times that'll be it's a surface answer because they've immediately replied, like they
Right.
didn't have to think about it. So what else, is when you can go a little deeper with that. Or if you're just hearing the same recycled things that you've been hearing, the narrative that's been painted over the years, yeah, we just can't close that kind of customer. That's just been a problem for, that department's always been bad about XYZ. Yeah, okay, well, but what else could be going on?
Mm-hmm.
So you're probing it. I like the analogy of a well, right? I want the well to go completely dry. So I'm willing to go back and dip the bucket into the well as many times as possible to get all the good stuff out. And once it's dry, then we can move on. Now it takes a little bit of courage to do that, right? Because people like my manager that called me get a little bit annoyed when you sort of go over ground that they feel like has already been covered. But it's worth it when you still feel like there's some probing that needs to be done to get to the root cause.
Oh yeah, yeah. And even questions like, all right, so walk me through this step by step.
Yes,
Walk me through when this happens. How does it start? What's happening in the middle, and how does it conclude?
yes.
And then yeah, you can see people's wheels turning, just like, okay, all right, so it usually begins with this, and then and you're like, okay, that's helpful. Eh,
Toyota popularized the five whys. That's an example of a root cause analysis. You're just probing deeper and deeper, farther back in the chain of events that led to the waste or the problem. There's a ton of ways to skin this cat. But again, notice what we've done, right? We've already clarified that we are on the right cat to skin before we start these probing questions on how to do the skinning.
Mhm.
Sorry, PETA, I will move on from that analogy to another analogy. My bad.
Maybe we'll get protested. That would be great.
You
The
want
All right,
you want
so
to go
we've
viral
we've
so
we've
bad.
kind of dove into this. We've uncovered some root causes, and oftentimes, and this it gets a little painful. It's time for reflective questions, uh, where
Yeah.
I've got to spark some ownership, create some self awareness, and some ownership around. Back to maybe I have a role to play in what's not working.
And I will have to say this is where my story really has its type of question, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
What else could you do? Right.
Mm-hmm.
That was my question basically to her. And but that's the point is you, right? What part of this do you own is another way to say it. You're trying to spark some sort of personal reflection on, an ownership, some self-awareness. Any coaching conversation, I don't care if you're a third party consultant like us or if you are the manager of the person you're talking to, there's sort of this expanding field of stuff you're talking about, and that expansion is awareness. And eventually, you hit the big aha. If things go well, you hit the big aha, and then everything narrows again. It narrows down to, okay, now there's some stuff I need to take action on. Well, you can't get to that until you've explored, explored, explored. Sometimes it's probing, sometimes it's reflecting and saying, what part of this do I own? Ah, I understand the situation more clearly now. Ah, I see my role in this. Ah, I see what I could do.
Mm-hmm.
And it leads to that moment where they go, got it. Okay, now let's talk about action. So this is the part where we're getting awareness.
Yeah, and the awareness, if I'm the leader, uh, that I've had an impact on this, positive or negative.
Yep.
And I always, my favorite is they're talking about an employee that they're struggling with, underperforming, not living up to expectations, whatever the thing is. And when you ask the question to that person's leader and go, all right, so what did you do or not do that contributed to this problem? They hate that. Like, no, he's the problem. We're talking about him not doing what he's supposed to do. I get that. What have you done or not done that has maybe contributed to this behavior?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you
What would
just,
you do differently next time?
yeah.
Yeah.
What
I
would
mean,
you
there's
do differently
millions.
if you were to bring a person on in the same position? What would you do differently,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
more, better, different, or less?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, they just like, yeah, I probably could have trained better, and I never really explained. They start to like, yeah, just painfully own that part of this is on me,
Yeah.
and which is part of how can we craft a great solution if we don't admit and put on the table all the things that contributed to the current lack of
Yeah.
performance. Yeah, we can't solve it unless we get it out there, and part of this is you could have done something different.
Well, and in our notes, preparing for this, we put reflection fuels responsibility, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's where we're going with this. I would like everybody to be more proactive and responsible for what they're bringing to the table. Intentional, right? You can't be intentional if you have no idea of how your actions are impacting things. So, that would be an example of how this plays out.
Oh yeah, and sometimes you get nice confessions there.
Yeah.
So yeah, all right, what did you do or didn't do that contributed to this employee's going on? And then yeah, well, in the interview there were some red flags,
Right.
and and I ignored them. And you're like, okay, this is good, this is
I
good.
think we're getting somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, sometimes yeah, you'll get that like, oh yeah, I did the thing, and even when I was doing it, I kind of knew that this wasn't going to end well for the department, for that person, for me.
Right.
Yeah, not good stuff.
Well, let's talk about the fourth type of question because I think a lot of people are guilty of getting to this stage where they reflect and have this insight and stuff gets out on the table if it's a group meeting and they're like, "Yeah, that's what's going on. Yeah. All right, good talk." And then they're moving on to the next bullet point on the agenda, right? But we haven't done anything yet, right? And if you're serious about being an inquiring leader, you're inquiring for a reason, right? It's not just to get an answer to the question, it's to solve a problem, it's to take action, it's to move forward. That's what coaches do, right? That a coach, whether it's a coach bus or a person who's a coach, is getting you from here to there, right? And so you are asking questions to help people unlock how they get there. So once we've hit awareness, great. Now we've got to move on to the fourth type of question, which are the visionary questions. We're
Mhm.
we're future focused here. We're thinking about a vision of what could be, and getting maybe even some motivation about what that might look like, what that might be that is exciting to us, that is enough fuel in the tank for us to take action.
Oh yeah. The idea of getting them from here to there. At this point, we have to define what there is.
Yep.
And so the idea of what would the ultimate outcome look like
Right.
if this was to be solved, and everybody's needs were met. What would that look like?
Yeah.
What would we be doing? What would it feel like? What would be the ultimate conclusion to this thing?
Yeah, and what might be happening if we achieved that, right? Like if we got past this barrier, what might we unlock for you, for the team, for the organization?
Mm-hmm.
What are the good consequences of achieving this? Or just putting more motivation, more vision there in the psyche of everybody involved, so that they are excited and can see where it is we're going and attempt to get there.
Oh yeah. Sometimes here the magic wand question. All right, so if we
Hmm.
had a magic wand and could solve this, what would it look like?
Yeah.
And and the idea that yeah, get them to imagine best case scenario, and then we
Right.
can figure out what are the action steps that could get us to that.
Yeah, yeah. And notice how this is really similar to where we started with clarifying questions, right? We were
Mhm.
clarifying what it is that the challenge was that we were working on. Now we think we know enough, we've got awareness that there's this solution we need. Well, now we're saying, okay, well, what is that? Right? So we defined a problem. Now we're defining a solution and what it's going to take to get there. So it's sort of like we've come full circle and we're back down. We started small saying, okay, what is it that we're working on? Let's clarify that. And then we start exploring. We had an aha after some probing and some reflecting. And now we're saying, okay, now let's get a vision for what it is we're going to be doing here and what that end state is going to look like. It's a really neat process to think through, sort of going through all four together. It's never nice and tidy the way I just described it, right? Like that's
Mhm.
in real world, you might be going back and forth between some of these types of questions until you're really clear, until you've really reflected. But that is the general scope of how the conversation goes.
Oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, well, figuring out what the end looks like allows me to move towards it in a more intentional fashion.
Great
The
way to put it.
and with your story, right? Your story is fantastic. So as you were discussing the problem, that was starting to come out. Best case scenario would be this person doesn't get laid off,
Yep.
the office doesn't get disrupted, and we live our values of being an organization that cares for its people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
Like,
That's
okay,
it.
that's the vision, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so how do we do that?
Well, let me be very clear. I didn't have a clue. It sounded to me like we had two options here, and neither were good. I
Yeah.
did agree it was a rock and a hard place.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why I say I sucked up my courage when I said, what other options are there? And then just some really tense silence after that. I mean, like, you know, I was counting, don't say anything for at least a count of 10. And yeah, she sort of half laughed and just she was upset and blurted out, that's why I hire you, Mark. I don't know. You're the coach. You tell me. That's why I'm here. Ha ha ha. And so here's what I did is it was a reflective question. And remember we just said, and what else?
Mm-hmm.
That being a question you could tack on. That's basically what I said. I said, well, before we move on, let's think about that first. What other options are there? And again, more, and then silence, and maybe a little longer silence, and then laughter. All of a sudden, this laugh came out, and the manager said, it's a computer job. She could work from home. There was a third way. Doggone
Yeah.
it.
Wait a minute. So we keep the work flowing, eliminate the disruption in the office, and keep this person gainfully employed.
That's pretty much how that conversation ended. She knew what she needed to do, right? Let's go verify her internet connection, make sure that she can get access to the systems offsite. We'll have to give her a different login. There were things, there were visionary questions that she had to sort of answer for herself, but that was the moment. That was the aha. We figured it out.
Right. Well, and those are such wonderful next steps.
Right.
Yeah, I gotta confirm that she can log in. I gotta confirm she's got internet. I gotta confirm, and then so yeah, little bite-sized pieces of action
Yep.
to now make the vision a reality.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's you are an amazing problem solver.
Uh, and that's the beauty of it, right? Like she solved her own problem, right?
Yep.
That's why we coach because the answers were already there. It's just helping her bring them to the surface of the well.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I got.
No, that's fantastic. So yeah, great story. The idea of yeah, when presented with an opportunity, there are clarifying questions, probing questions, reflective questions, visionary questions. And now we help the person to solve their own issue. And when you think about it, right, we started this conversation off with somebody called and asked for advice and you didn't give it to them. And
Yeah.
the downside of that, right, becoming the answer man and or providing a solution based upon a little bit of fact and a whole lot of assumptions that turns out to be not a good choice.
Right.
So I'm either you're gonna provide an answer that's gonna make things worse, or I'm gonna shut down critical thinking, problem solving, creative and innovative solutions by the person who's in the challenge. Yeah, all of this is, as long range benefits for the people who you're asking these questions of.
Yes. And in fact, you did a great job just now teasing our next episode. I don't know our exact title, but we're going to be talking about how directive leadership has some limitations. There are some times when you want to use it, but there are some real limitations there, and we're going to talk around those hurdles.
Mm-hmm.
But before we quit, could I just ask our audience a favor? Is that okay, Mike, if I ask our audience, both of them?
Yeah. I'm sure they're hanging on the edge of their seats.
I would love for them to tag us in social media posts around this episode or around the book. I would love it if they would post on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on X, aka Twitter. I would love for them to review The Inquiring Leader on Amazon. We'll provide a link in the show notes, obviously. But we always forget to do marketing of ourselves. We just have these chats and really enjoy it and post them online, and we're excited for the feedback that we get on how they've been helpful and practical. But yeah, if you could do that for us, that would be phenomenal.
Oh yeah, that would be fantastic. And any feedback, bloop it in the comments below. Send us an email. All our information's out there. And with that, we'll turn it over to somebody who's been with us since the beginning. Right. Our number
Mhm.
one fan, our announcer, Mr. Wolf. Take it away, Mr. Wolf.
So go ahead and tweet that, or share it any other way you want. As always, there are no rights reserved, no trademarks, no copyrights. Share it if you want to. And join us next time on It Doesn't Take a Genius.
That's good enough.